Because of my opinions, this has caused me to be labelled a self-hating black woman by black people, never by white people, or shall I say scarcely by white people to my face anyway, but black people have always found an opportunity to call me self-hating. So I want to share these thoughts, these experiences that have invited such a label to be placed upon me. And I want to talk about my experience about being black today. There has always been instances where I've been told that I was somehow not black enough, you know. So I want to explore what it means to be black. If I wasn't black enough, what does it mean to be black enough? It certainly can't be just about your skin color anymore, because if it was, then hello, I am black as it can be, but it doesn't stop people from saying that I'm not, or I don't belong to the black community, or I can't be claimed as one of their own. I was always somehow a disgrace, a disappointment, a traitor to my group and my skin color. Again, and all this was due to the fact that I thought, spoke and behaved, quote unquote, behaved differently to how, again, quote unquote, a normal or typical black person was supposed to think, speak and behave. And you know, I don't like this expression. I don't like when people say things like, well, you're not a typical black person, you're not a typical white person. Oh, I wouldn't have guessed that you were this or that color, and so on and so forth. I don't, what does this mean? You know, why are certain standards of behavior, why do we seem to pin it to groups of people? And these sorts of comments, they still perplex me till this day. The fact that there seems to be different types of quote unquote black. And there are certain unspoken and even spoken conditions for a black person to meet in order to be considered authentically black, or black enough to stay in the exclusive community. I mean, we can all remember, you know, when Joe Biden said during the US 2020 presidential race, you know, we can remember when he expressed on, I believe it's the Breakfast Club or show, with Charlemagne the God, someone who is, you know, a highly esteemed person in a black community. But that didn't stop Joe Biden saying that any black person struggling to decide whether they should vote for Trump or him wasn't black. If you're wondering whether to vote for me or Trump, then you ain't black. You ain't black. So let's explore this. The context, for those who don't know, I have audiences everywhere, but as many people in the US know, black people in the United States have historically and consistently voted for and aligned with the Democratic Party. So in that specific instance, what Joe Biden was literally saying was that the party's policies, so the Democratic Party's policies and their strategies and plans, were in effect a secondary matter. This was a secondary matter to be concerned about by the black community. What should matter more was that the black community, quote unquote, stay in line and do what they'd always done, which was essentially voting for the Democratic Party. Doing so allows them to stay loyal to their blackness. Any alternative action would signal some betrayal to who they are. You know, this is a little bit similar in the UK. You know, the left political party, the Labour Party, you know, they've always been sort of the party of the ethnic minorities, or for the ethnic minorities, can I say, for the oppressed, for the marginalized, you know. But the Conservative Party here, similar to the US, has always been labelled the racist, white supremacist, nationalist party. So really, black people voting Conservative is like, what are you doing? But this is deeper than we think. Just process this with me. Go through this with me. White people are free and can vote for any party, and it doesn't necessarily become an attack on their racial identity. Okay, for example, if a white Democratic Party voter encounters a white Republican voter, or in the case of the UK, a white Conservative voter meets a white Labour Party voter, they will have clashes, of course, depending on the level of passion both have for the parties they support. They will have clashes. You know, one will accuse the other that they are letting the country down because they believe that the opposing party doesn't have the best interests of the country in mind. But none of them will attack the skin color of the other. None of them. But the story immediately changes if it were a black person. though the black person is American, is British, born in these countries, but if they don't vote for who it has been subliminally prescribed for them to vote for, then the issue is less about them letting their country down and more about them letting their race down or their collective group down. Bear in mind, this isn't only in relation to voting, this is in relation to anything else, you know, that the black community have socially deemed to be the black way, quote unquote. And, you know, just an aside note, just an observation. Perhaps the reason the majority of black people put their collective group before their country or the country they reside in is because maybe they genuinely feel that the country is not for their group. So it doesn't matter how much they, you know, are in the country systems, if they are in the legal systems, if they're in police, even if they're in the bureaucratic systems, even if a member of their group is given some form of authority in this same system they complain about, this system that's unfavorable against them. You know, for example, Obama won the US presidential election for 2 terms, but they still don't believe, they refuse to believe that the country accepts them or has their best interests in mind. It's crazy. So back to the subject matter of quote unquote being black. There's a lot of quote unquotes in this episode. So being black, as you know, I was born in Nigeria. Being black wasn't a subject matter in Nigeria, you know. There were no expectations or behavioral norms or constructs, you know, that were attached to the black skin. You know, in Nigeria, I was just Ada. I was just a full of life, intelligent, intuitive girl. Notice there isn't the word black in that description. But when I came to the UK, I was still that girl, but the only difference was that black became part of my description. And not only that, it seemed to be pushed to the forefront of my identity. So in other words, I went from being a full of life, intelligent, intuitive girl to being a black girl that was full of life, intelligent, beautiful, and naturally intuitive. And this wasn't an issue. After all, I am black, so being described as one is fine. But the problem was always trying to maintain some kind of image of blackness. And it was more when I was with black people than when I was with white people. It just felt that way. I know a lot of black people say that they have pressure to try and fit into the white society, but I had pressure trying to fit into the black society, because it was like, and before I go on, I know many black people say, well, the reason you felt pressure to fit into the black society is because you're self-hating. That's the point. You're self-hating. You're uncomfortable in these groups because you are self-hating. You know, because of self-loathing, you loathe yourself. You can't be with your own people, quote unquote. So I've heard it all before, but no, it wasn't that. It was because in groups where everyone was black, there was always this underlying thought that one wrong word from me, one wrong idea or viewpoint, and then it would just end up with me having some tiring debate trying to defend my blackness. So it was exhausting. It was exhausting trying to maintain my image of blackness when all I wanted to be was just Ada. I didn't want every action of mine to be scrutinized. Well, is this for black people or against black people? I'm not trying to do things for or against groups. I'm just trying to live my life. And many people, 80% of people in the UK, US are trying to do so. Yes, there are a handful of white people who are so racist that it's their life mission to see black people fail. But there are also a small group of black people who believe that they are supreme, who believe that they have the right to gatekeep on what other black people do. That any black person that is not strictly in line with these invisible rules and regulations, you know, that someone has made up, is seen to be a friend of the enemy, which is quote unquote the white person. So I know I'm speaking very candidly, and here is not to cause division. Oh, white people hate black people, black. No, it's not that, but it's just to expose some thinking and to talk about things that aren't being talked about at the moment. For example, when I was in secondary school, This was when I was starting to become more and more conscious of my skin color when I came to the UK. I came to the UK a year before I started secondary school. I was becoming more conscious of the way I was supposed to act based on my skin color. You know, I remember, let's start with, I'm going to talk about different groups. So I remember receiving comments from white people such as, you know, you're pretty for a black girl. Look, comments like these do come from racist intention sometimes, but sometimes they come from ignorance. Then there were comments I heard from black people such as, well, you're quiet for a black girl, you know, or you're weird for a black girl, you know. And the funny thing is that I wasn't really quiet. I mean, I wasn't necessarily like excessively loud, but I wouldn't have classed myself as quiet. I was quite talkative, but I've always been reserved somehow and calculative with my words, you know. So I've never really understood what solicited these kind of comments. But yes, in all, I received all kinds of comments that pertained to my blackness. And thinking about it, I feel the reason I received them wasn't only because I was black, but I think also because I was African and I emigrated from Africa, you know. Maybe that's why there were comments of me being weird. My culture was different, so maybe it was weird to them because for sure their culture was weird to me. But just because your culture is weird to someone else or different to someone else doesn't mean that your culture is the right way and theirs is not. Your culture is the standard and theirs is the weird one. And this goes from all angles. I wasn't necessarily weird. I had different ways. I had different customs, different mannerisms, different cultural habits. Maybe they thought I was quiet because, for example, when I was in class, I didn't play with my schoolwork. In class, I was silent. All I cared about was the teacher in front of the classroom. There wasn't any answering back, and that's how it is in Nigeria. We don't play when it comes to education, academia, studies. There's zero room for distractions or slackness in class, you know? There's no answering back, there's no small chit chats. So of course, I automatically, subconsciously transferred this mindset when I came to the UK, you know? And by the way, I'm not saying or implying that people don't take their education seriously here, but it is noticeably much more lenient here, you know, especially in terms of how the classes are run and what pupils are allowed to say and get away with compared to Nigeria. It's not better, it's not worse, you know, it's just different. In all, these comments, whoever it came from, it leaves a mark, you know, it left a mark. It creates a lot of sort of confusion, inner issues, identity issues, questions, inner conflict, and a whole lot of other insecurities. Everyone is different, but for me, the comments I received from black people hurt me more. They stuck with me more, you know, because, for example, we preach in the black community, we preach this collectivity, this oneness, this unity. I even remember receiving a comment. This was the one that stuck with me until today. I say a comment, but it started off as a comment, but quickly developed into something more menacing. His name was Jonah, and he would call me, he would find every opportunity. As soon as he saw me, he would taunt me, mock me, and call me Blick. Blick. The word blick is colloquial. It's slang for really dark person, really black person. It's a racial slur, you know. This guy Jonah is a black man now, but he was a boy then. So he was black and he was calling me a racial slur, you know, calling me Blick. So it's very interesting, you know, and I never heard the word before. He called me that. So it's very interesting that it was a black boy that I first heard this word from. Now, I'm gonna stop here.